region and of course the entire world as well. As we've already seen, we have our panelists in studio with us. This is Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who is the chairman of African Capacity Building Foundation, also is the chairman of Trademark East Africa, and the former deputy chair of the African Union. Also joining us this morning is Njoki Omai. She is Dr. Njoki Omai. She is a lecturer at USIU, Faculty of International Relations and Politics. Yeah. And of course, she shall be joined also by Irungu Houghton, who is Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. And also, we are eagerly waiting to be joined by Dr. Hassan Khanenje, who is the Director at the Horn Institute, as well as Professor Naomi Damba. So we shall be looking at a lot of issues that is affecting our country so far. We know the flare-up of Ethiopia and the Kenya border there. What is really instigating this? We delve deeper with the panelists. We cross over now also to, we'll be crossing over, I should say, to South Sudan as well. That peace pact that is meant to be, of course, installed in this May, it seems to be a bit fragile. And we'll give you the gritty details of this as well, and where we have also American think tanks that actually are also affecting this particular peace process in South Sudan. A raft of issues as well. We know today is a big day for South Africa. That also can be or will be also on our agenda this morning. So there's so many issues that we'll be discussing this morning, and I hope also you get to drive a show with me. You can always hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle, AM Live NTV, our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. But for now, we begin with the Daily Nation, the good, the bad, and the ugly in our dailies. This is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Science mass failure crisis, Kenya's doom. That is the splash today. Only a handful of students qualify for courses needed for growth. Take off. What shall we eat? That's a probing question. Agriculture and science-based courses in universities have not attracted students, dimming the country's development prospects. And this story continues on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. Entry mark for degree programs. 280 programs are supported by scoring at least C+ in biology. 355 programs are supported by scoring at least a C+ in chemistry. 187 programs are supported by scoring at least a C+ in physics. That is a story that you want to follow also inside the Daily Nation, as I've mentioned on page 6 of the paper today. We have a sidebar story there. So lie down, finding the strength to move on. For Rose Wangui, who it says, Solai Dam, finding the strength to move on for Rose Wangui, who lost all her 4 children in Solai Dam disaster a year ago. The birth of her son last month symbolizes a new beginning. I thank God that He has given me a new baby, and I'm praying that Isaac marks the beginning of a new life, she says. Ms. Wangui and thousands of other survivors of the disaster are picking up their lives one piece at a time, but praying that justice will be done. This story is tucked away on page 10 and 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. So make sure you grab a copy. The Standard is up next, and this is what is holding for us on the front page of the Standard. Governors blast Rotich over errors is a splash today. Maybe to zoom out a bit so that you can see clearly how it looks. Suspect budget. Governors blame Treasury for 10 billion shillings, which irregularly approved and supposedly spent by counties on suspect items like South Sudan peace process, State House affairs, and free primary education. This story continues on page 6 of the Standard today. TAC interdicts 160 teachers for resisting new curriculum. The tutors from 8 counties have been accused of disrupting recent training on the new curriculum across the country. They have 21 days to defend themselves. This story continues on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Graft probe. Cherargei asks Sang to resign. This is all about corruption. Nandi Senator Samson Cherargei wants Governor Stephen Sang to step down, even as the county chief yesterday suspended 16 officials to pave way for investigations into reports of corruption in his administration. All that you have it also on page 7 of the Standard this morning. Residents' wrath, lorries burnt in protest. This is a standalone picture here. An empty shell. 2 lorries that were burnt by residents of Gataka village in Ongata Rungai, Kajiado County yesterday. The residents were demonstrating after a lorry knocked down a 4-year-old schoolboy, killing him instantly. This story continues on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Let's see also what we have on the front page of the Star. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Star this morning, 2022. Raila in new bid to salvage ODM is a splash today. Task force warns that ODM's prospects are bleak if leadership doesn't wake up. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Change of guard. Retired Colonel Cyrus Ogunga replaces Kiraithe as government spokesman. You have the story on page 6 of the Star. And we have here a standalone picture. Now let him come to me, he shall know there is a prophet in Israel. Right, there is a prophet there. And this is in the house of the Lord, Deputy President William Ruto, with clergy of the African Divine Church at his official residence in Karen yesterday. And this is how it went. Right. They're getting pious there. And this is a quote actually from 2 Kings 5:8 that says, now let him come to me. He shall know there is a prophet in Israel. You can read that also in the Bible, 2 Kings 5:8. And that is Deputy President there must with the members of the African Divine Church at his official residence in Karen yesterday. Also, governors turn heat on Treasury over bizarre payments. You can read the details of all that on page 2. Also, Magoha to shut hundreds of schools over standards. That is a story tucked away on page 6 of the Star this morning. Cholera has killed 11 since January. This is according to Cabinet Secretary Cecily Kariuki. You can read the rest of the details on page 11 of the Star. Let's see what the People Daily is holding for us. Kenyans choking in personal debts. That is a splash today. Kenyans are choking in personal debts. It is tough times here. A growing appetite for quick cash, especially on easily accessible and even enticing mobile loan apps, shackle borrowers in abyss of financial ruin. This story continues on page 14 and 15 of the People Daily. This is a worrying trend. Fuliza loan growth in 6 months. You can see the figures here. Just in 6 months, amount borrowed in first month was 6.2 billion shillings. Amount borrowed in 3 months rose to 29 billion shillings, and now it stands at 45 billion shillings amount borrowed within 6 months. Other popular mobile loan platforms are also shown here, and you can read the rest of the story inside the People Daily this morning on page 14 and 15. Also, team formed to probe audit puzzle in counties. Conspiracy? That is their budding question. Alarm bells ring as more governors find themselves confronted by weird budget lines as blame game over controversy hits fever pitch. This story continues on page 4 of the People Daily, and those affected are also listed here, beginning with Kitui, Nyeri, Kirinyaga, Laikipia, Kwale, Garissa, Lamu, Kakamega, Nyamira, Samburu, Kiambu, and Nairobi. So make sure you also flip over to page 4 of the People Daily this morning for the rest of the details of that story as well. Taifa Leo is holding this splash for us. Ngome ya Ruto yapasuka, it says. Waliokuwa washirika waanza kujitenga na vuguvugu la kuvumisha azima yake ya kuwania urais mwaka wa 2022 there. And the story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Also, you can see that related picture, or not really a related picture, but a standalone picture of a pious moment there where he was flocked by members of African Divine Church, nyumbani kwake mtaani Karen, Nairobi. That is what the caption is reading here inside the Taifa Leo. Let's get down to business, and we pick up the Business Daily to see what is holding for us this morning. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Business Daily. KDF takes over 2.8 billion shillings Uchumi Kasarani land. Shock for troubled retail chain as occupation of prime parcel by the Kenya Defence Forces puts in doubt revival plans that were hinged on sale of Thika Road land. It says troubled retail chain Uchumi Supermarkets is locked in a land ownership dispute with Kenya Defence Forces, which has laid claim to a 20-acre prime parcel of land located in Kasarani near the Thika Superhighway. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, boost for pension, and we can see Retirement Benefits Authority CEO Nzomo Mutuku, Chairman Victor Pratt, and Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich can be seen here during the launch of the RBA Strategic Plan 2019-2024 at KICC yesterday. The RBA is banking on the informal sector and the mobile phone technology to raise pension contributions to 2.4 trillion shillings in the next 5 years. This story continues on page 19 of the Business Daily. Kimemia Wambora face JKIA tender queries. That is a story that you want to follow on page 4 of the Business Daily. Also, OT Morpho asks court to quash 10-year ban by Parliament. French technology firm Inea Securities, formerly OT Morpho, has moved to court seeking a review of a 10-year ban recently imposed on it by the National Assembly. MPs on April the 23rd amended the report of the Watchdog Public Accounts Committee on the audited accounts of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IBC, to declare that the electoral body contract with Inea had violated the Companies Act. You can read the rest of the details on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also on the ticker, troops budget fall signals Somalia pull-out strategy. The European Union's compensation budget for Kenya troops fighting Al-Shabaab in Somalia is set to start falling in the financial year beginning July, signaling the onset of gradual withdrawal from the war-torn nation. And this story continues on page 5 of the Business Daily. Remember, today is standing on guard also. We can highlight on that as well to see what is the way forward as far as the war in or the boots on the ground in Somalia is concerned, where we have our forces who attach the AMISOM in Somalia. Counties on the spot as garbage dumping worsens. Illegal movement and dumping of waste worsened last year, new data showed, turning fresh focus on the lapses in garbage management by county administrators. You have this story continuing on page 12 and 13 of the Business Daily. Cost of domestic debt at 5-year low. Yields on the benchmark 3-month treasury bills fell for the sixth straight week to an average of 7.25%, the lowest since March 14th, when the returns to investors sank to a low last seen in July 2013. This story continues on page 20 of the Business Daily this morning. Why don't we cross over now to Tanzania and we pick up the Citizen? We see also what is happening in Tanzania. Government scraps 16 charges to spur farmer investment. The decision announced in Parliament yesterday will take effect at the start of next financial year. And this story continues on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Also, we have more abolished charges. The government has removed retention fees for domestic products, duplicate certificates fees, local industries inspection fee, new food shops inspection fees, export permit fees, and small-scale food industries inspection fee. Also abolished are food adverts, assessment fees, medical representatives fees, veterinary medicine retail shops inspection fee, certificate of pharmaceutical product fee, and disposal certificate fee. That is the splash on the front page of the Citizen. Nation comes together to bid Mengi farewell. And we can see here the inconsolable, these are mourners who are overcome with grief after paying their last respects to the late industrialist, philanthropist, and media magnate Reginald Mengi at Karimjee Hall, Dar es Salaam yesterday. You can see the related story also and another picture on page 4 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Remember, the burial will be tomorrow. And of course, we shall be following that story as well. Iran firm fails to overturn 27 billion shillings tender award. That is another story on page 62. And High Court gives state go-ahead to seize Desi Billions assets. That story tucked away on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Mwananchi is the Swahili version. I'll zoom out for you to see clearly how it looks this morning. And this is how it looks, and that is a splash for you. Mabilioni ya Desi yataifishwa. That is what we have as a splash. Ni baada ya mahakama kuridhika kuwa fedha hizo zilipatikana kihalifu. That story continues on page 4 of Mwananchi. And also faraja here, Rais Magufuli akitoa mkono wa pole kwa watoto pacha wa aliyekuwa mwenyekiti mtendaji wa kampuni ya IPP Reginald Mengi wakati wa kuaga mwili wa mfanyi biashara huyo maarufu kwenye viwanja vya Karimjee jijini Dar es Salaam jana. You can follow the story on also inside the, that is inside Mwananchi on page 3 today. Let's see what is happening in Uganda, and this is what we're waking up to today. Cabinet test leaders for drugs before polls. This is a new one there. New game rules. Ministers resolve to amend the electoral laws, I should say, which will require political candidates from local council to president to take urine blood test for illegal drugs as a condition for appearing on ballots. Right, this is bound to spark a lot of debate there in Uganda, and the story continues on page 4 of the Daily Monitor this morning. Ministers resolved to amend the electoral laws which will require political candidates from local council to president to take urine blood test for illegal drugs as a condition for appearing on the ballot. And we have a standalone picture here. Police battle Bobi Wine supporters. Border cyclists can be seen riding past burning tires in Kamwokwa, a Kampala suburb yesterday. Supporters of Kyandondo East MP Robert Kyangulanyi, aka Bobi Wine, fought running battles with police, paralyzing business in parts of the city as they protested the MP's arrest and remand to Luriza prison on Monday. That story continues on page 6 of the Daily Monitor. Don't rush sugar bill, says Museveni. That is on page 3 as well today. Mbarara's renowned, that is a renowned businessman, Kaino Bwisho, is dead. And you can follow the story on page 2 of the Daily Monitor. Let's see what is happening in Rwanda. We pick up now the New Times. FRG needs 30 billion shillings, 30 billion Rwandan francs for survivors' housing. This is what we have as a splash today. And it says the fund for supporters of genocide survivors needs at least 30 billion shillings, 30 billion Rwandan francs, I should say, for construction or renovation of houses of vulnerable survivors. Parliament has had. This story continues on page 2. Also, government unveils 1.7 billion Rwandan francs vaccine warehouse, and we can see Health Minister, Permanent Secretary Jean-Pierre Nyemazi and other officials given a tour of a new vaccine warehouse at the Special Economic Zone in Kigali by Hassan Sibomana, the Director of Vaccination Unit at Rwanda Biomedical Center yesterday. Also, BNR reassures on stability of currency market. You can follow the story on page 3 of the New Times in Rwanda. I want to show you also what we have this week on the front page of the East African. And this is what you'll be waking up to this week on the front page of the East African. Not again. Juba principals bent on blocking peace. That is their burning question. Right? Unto the darkness, South Sudan's leaders differ on forming transitional government by May the 12th, which President Kiir paying former U.S. envoy Michael Ranneberger $3.7 million to block the hybrid court, with President Kiir paying former U.S. envoy Michael Ranneberger $3.7 million to block the hybrid court. Of course, this court is very essential in having this peace realized and the transitional government in Sudan are being formed as well. But why are we having these think tanks also scuttling the whole process? That is their burning question. We shall lay that on the table of our panelists this morning to discuss that and a raft of other issues as far as South Sudan is concerned. And also, the South Sudan has been denied country, kidnapping, killing prominent critics. That is also in South Sudan as well. And we shall be giving you greater details of this as well much later in the course of the program. Kenya now defies Dar on Mara Dams. Water Minister insists the two projects are part of a joint venture or joint ventures. That is a story that you want to follow also. Full report on page 3 of the East African this week. Have you picked a copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly? But before I go there, I can show you also what to do have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as well. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Well, it seems it is corrupt, so it cannot be able to open up. But I can show you what we have this month on the front page of the Nairobi Law Monthly. And this is how it looks. Jubilee grants Justice Ojwang, it says. A stay of execution, decades of fawning, subservience, and false legal philosophy seem to have brought Judge a way out of an ignominious exit. That is a story that you can follow exclusively inside the Nairobi Law Monthly. Also, there is a review. Whom are this government's ridiculous regulations for? Right? Remember the dairy regulations, amongst others as well. What does it portend for you, Mwananchi? Also, talking guns, echoes of Kenya's proxy war in Somalia is another story covered in the recent copy or the current copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly. Also, we have the Nairobi Business Monthly as well. This is how it looks. What makes a startup African? The case of Jumia. Of course, they've listed to the NYC, and this is the first one for Africa as well. So you can read the gritty details of this also inside in the recent copy of the Nairobi Business Monthly. In Money and Markets, analysis of performance of Kenya's listed banks, also politics, bias and law. Find out Namuhula's death and indictment to Beyond Zero campaign, and executive arena, loss-making UAP banks on government security for recovery is a story also you can follow inside the Nairobi Business Monthly as well. Let's see quickly what we have as the editorial cartoons. I guess you've not missed anything, but allow me also to hark you back to, of course, 1963 to just get a snippet of how the Daily Nation looked then. A copy of the Daily Nation in 1963. And this was a splash then. Crisis for Obote as nurses sacked. Emergency plans for evacuating patients swung into operations tonight, and a government SOS went out appealing for retired nurses and midwives to report for duty at New Mulago Hospital, Uganda's, of course, given that figure, £2,300,000, sterling pounds, that is, sterling pounds, Ultra Modern Medical Center, following the dismissal of more than 160 trainee nurses who defied Prime Minister Milton Obote's personal order to them to wear numbered badges. That's how it looked then in 1963. Also, water babies, and a soldier of the RRSC, one of the many army units which answered the appeal by the Nairobi City Council for help during the city water crisis, measure out water for a group of 30 African children. Right? This just didn't start today. Also, harking back, this was a problem. And you can see also Ngala on power of regions. Attempts are being made to exaggerate the powers of central government under Kenya's new constitution and to belittle and reduce the status and powers of the regions to those of the present local government, declared Mr. Ronald Ngala, KADU's president, in a statement issued in Mombasa yesterday. Right, for the millennials, of course, this is a bit of history for you, and you can even get a copy of this from our archives, Nation Media Group's library, that is a print library. Maybe I can just pick another page for you to just see before we buckle down to see also what we have as the editorial cartoons. This is how also page 2 looked way back in 1963. Right, there you go. Finally, I want to show you also what we have here as some of, where did I actually put it here so that I can show you a picture from our archives as well. Well, I'll do that much later in the course of the program, just to show you also what we had from our pictures in 1963, how also some of the photos were captured as well. But nonetheless, we can continue with the editorial cartoons. And this is what has been drawn today by Steno inside the People Daily. Right. Emergency Casualty Department, snore. The inspectors have been sleeping, and this is what has been happening so far. And this is in light of baby Ethan, who passed away because of the overdose of morphine. Right. I am in charge. Right. While the ministry is asleep, the quacks also are taking charge. And this is what Stano has actually captured this morning. Let's see also what we have inside the Daily Nation today. All right, this is Victor. According to Victor, the current revolution in Kenya. The current revolution in Kenya, and that is Kenya, which is the meat pie there, the map of Kenya, and everyone is taking their piece, from the Archbishop to the posy of goons as well, and some of the faces that you can recognize there as well. The current revolution in Kenya. I'll leave it for you to decipher that. Let's see also what Gado has drawn for us inside the Standard today, and this is your splash today. Not really splash, but your detail cartoon inside the Standard today. Back to the future, and that is Boni Mwangi, as you can see. The current state of play as far as the freedom of expression is concerned, right? We have Mwakenya there, Pambana, and you can see a gun is being shown towards Boni Mwangi as depicted there, but he's actually, you know, sticking out that middle finger. And we have this gentleman saying, we have evidence you're planning a revolution. But that Kanu salute, which is a middle finger, has saved you. I'll leave it for you to decipher. That is what we have inside the Standard today as the editorial cartoon. So make sure you grab a copy of the dailies for this as well. But to the first story, as I mentioned, a pathology report after the post-mortem examination of baby Ethan reveals that he died out of respiratory depression caused by the swelling of the brain due to the alleged intoxication. Ethan died on Sunday at Shalom Hospital in Machakos after he was injected with morphine, which was 20 times more than the recommended dosage for his weight. However, the conclusive toxicological results will be released on the 21st of this month. Meanwhile, the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya has stated that the person who dispensed the controlled drug was not a qualified pharmacist, and the baby could have been saved if an antidote was administered on time.
The only positive finding, we would say, largely was in the brain, which appears swollen. The rest of the tissues are essentially normal. There's no evidence of injury or trauma to the head, the chest, or any other part of the body.
Place where, you know, that lacked professionals who were able to calculate and say that this baby needs this. If that's the only medicine that's available, then at what dosage do they require it?
A drug classified as a controlled product that should be handled only by a qualified pharmacist who adheres to a professional code of conduct. Medicines are poisons and should be handled by the right professionals to provide benefit without harm.
You must have the antidote called naloxone stocked in hospital and ready for use in case your patient develops side effects. Unfortunately, what occurred was that the patient was discharged after being given morphine. It doesn't seem like any monitoring was done.
And the elders from the Gabriel community are calling on the government to open an inquest to establish whether the Forole attack was planned by some politicians from the county. The elders claim the politicians have been funding militias in Ethiopia to cause havoc. This comes after 11 people were killed and 2 others seriously injured after insurgents from Ethiopia ambushed locals who were attending a security meeting.
Maafisa wa serikali wa Kenya na maafisa wa serikali wa Ethiopia ambao kuhusishwa kwenye mkutano. Kwa hivyo sisi tunachukulia kwamba labda ilikuwa ni mkutano ya ngazi ya kijamii. Hizo militia walikuwa na claim kwamba kuna mifugo yao ilikuwa siku 2 kabla ya hiyo tukio. Na wakasema kwamba watu hao wawili waliuawa. Kwa hivyo hiyo ilikuwa ni kama shambulizi la kulipiza kisasi. Ila amani ya kudumu inaletwa tu watu wakikaa chini na waelewane na watengeneze njia ya amani. Kwa hivyo kama kuna watu wako na dhana kwamba kwa sababu bunduki zilichukuliwa ndio maana wamevamiwa, hiyo sio kweli. Na ingekuwa hivyo, hizo bunduki 2 hazingeenda. Tunawasiliana na serikali ya Ethiopia na pia wanatusaidia kuchunguza jambo hilo.
All right, we just want to hear from our panelists as well. You're watching Standing on Guard, where we discuss matters security and these flare-ups in Ethiopia-Kenyan border. What is really instigating this? Is this politicians who are actually perpetrating or maybe pushing the envelope as far as the flare-ups are concerned? Allow me to introduce a panelist to you. Earlier on, at the top of the hour, I had introduced to you Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who is the chairman of African Capacity Building Foundation, also the chairman of Trademark East Africa, and the former deputy chair of the African Union. We do have with us as well Dr. Njoki Omar. She is an assistant professor at USAU on international relations there. She teaches that. And also we do have Professor Noami Damba with us, who's the vice chancellor of KCA University and also an expert on foreign policy and defense. We have with us as well Irungu Houghton, who is the executive director of Amnesty International Kenya, and also Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is a director at the Horn Institute. Good morning, gentlemen and the lady.
Good morning, Debarl.
Thank you. Maybe we can just begin with the flare-ups that is happening right now, and you can see the leaders also are saying this is being perpetrated by politicians. Why do you think there is this instigations by the politicians, if that allegation is anything to go by? Let's just begin with you, Erastus Mwencha.
Thank you, Debarl, and good to see you.
Good to see you.
I think there are three main factors that inform the flare-up in the Kenya-Ethiopia border. The first one, it's a long-standing issue,
yes,
which has got to do with water. And of course, then you can go backwards and say this is a climate change issue. And it looks like the two communities have been sharing some water point somewhere, and there's a disagreement on how that should be managed. The second one has to do with the livestock deaths, which also goes along with sharing these places where these communities stay. And the third one is, of course, the issue of arms. Mm-hmm. And as the county commissioner mentioned on the clip that you just showed us, it would appear that on the Kenyan side there has been disarmament, mm-hmm, whereas on the Ethiopian side, which means the two communities are not balanced. And to me, this is now a matter of two countries then coming together to make sure that there is a peace deal between the two communities so that they can live together. But I think that the more dangerous angle now that you, as you pointed out, that there are politicians involved. I don't know what angle they are coming from. It's possible that some of them see benefits of those influx or trying to gain some advantage against the others. And that, I think the government is in a position to move and nip this crisis in the bud.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. Let's hear from Irungu Houghton. Good morning.
So I think the broader context for this really is, I think, as Ambassador Mwencha said, is really climate change and the power that it now has to redefine politics, economics, society, and various relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There is a connection between, all the things that we have been seeing in the last couple of years. The snowfall in Nyandarua, the failing rains this year, or even the Mount Kenya fires that happened less than a few weeks ago, and cyclones in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And the thing that connects all of those things is climate change. Mm-hmm. And I think what we have to really contend with is that this is the big referenda for Kenya. Yeah? Mm-hmm. How are we able to adapt to climate change in a smart way? We have spent a lot of time in the last few months thinking about the different counties, the constituency boundaries, and how this should be structured. And what we are told by the National Meteorological Department is essentially the country is being divided into just three boundaries. There are what they call drought-prone counties, there are flood-prone counties, and then lastly there are landslide-prone counties. And I think once the political class and some of our citizens begin to focus our attention on climate change, we may have a different set of conversations around constituency boundaries that are not violent and that are not naked contests for very limited pasture or very limited water resources.
Mm. All right, let's hear from Njoki Omar, and of course we had Professor Noami Damba has always insisted that of course the next war, so to speak, will be the war on resources. Mm-hmm. And this is now a gripping reality that we can see on the ground as well. Let's hear from Dr. Njoki.
I think this conflict actually reminded me of Bonaya Godana, mm-hmm, Dr. Bonaya Godana.
The late.
the late Bonaya Godana. And the history of this, North Hor, the border between Ethiopia, and I think it's well explained how complex it is, so many factors. And it's sad that I think even Bonaya died when they were going to resolve a similar conflict. And we are still at it. So what is going on with the state? Could it, I mean, it's really sad that we are still at it, nothing has been done. And also what I think we need to think about how borders in African countries, it's like the state doesn't exist along the borders. And so you find, as much as we have, of course, water issues and climate change and disarmament, but the state kind of is not there, not just this border, so many other borders. And so many people, and you can see these citizens along there, take the law into their hands. And that's why many border communities, again, it's almost like important to have a gun because you're on your own, basically. So for me, it's going back to African states and how they've I mean, of course, it's very colonial. It has a colonial history where the state was centered around the center. And so now it's time to make sure everybody feels like part of the state. And this pulling and going back to the borders and making sure every citizen feels like an equal citizen of the country, and they don't have to resort to their, I mean, they don't have to be on their own for their own security.
Right, and it seems also that security remains very fluid there because, as I mentioned, Bonaya Godana died actually while through a military plane crash while trying to go to resolve some of these skirmishes that we have within Marsabit as well. So throughout the years, it seems then this is a holy grail. Does it mean we'll never have, so to speak, peace in some of these border areas? Hassan Khanenje.
Debarl, good morning.
Good morning.
I think part of this problem is actually our own. Part of it is environmental, but part of it is because we've simply been sleeping on the job. We know that these border areas are fragile and they're conflict prone. It is something that has been going on, of course, since independence. And we are not doing, I think, enough to make sure that we strengthen security apparatus there, but then also move towards permanence in terms of ensuring the security in those places is always strengthened. Now, the border communities, of course, between Kenya and Ethiopia, then Kenya and Somalia, there are certain similarities that they share. They tend to be pastoral. And I think it's about time, especially in the light of the changing climatic conditions, that we move our communities and our country towards more sustainable livelihoods and economic livelihood. Because we know at the rate at which, of course, the effects of climate change are affecting our continent and our country, some of these things are not likely to be reversed anytime soon. And so we need to adapt different mechanisms. So we stop killing each other over water, for instance. Can we establish some reservoirs and start doing irrigation? Or should we teach also our people to adopt different means of livelihood so they actually don't exclusively rely, let's say, on pastoralism, which by and large, they are at the mercy of the rains, and you can't really operate like that in the current world. And so on a policy level, I think we need to move more strategically and more deliberately and very intentional with regard to having a paradigm shift on how we approach both security, as in moving towards permanence, especially in the border areas, but also in changing the way our people earn their livelihoods, that is in a way that's sustainable.
Right, Naomi Damba.
Debarl, I generally agree with my colleagues here in terms of what they're saying. But let me take it and probably expand a little bit on what Khanenje is saying. We have disturbed through the Gibe Dam on River Omo. The upstream dam has affected, as disastrous effect on lower downstream. We have a contested border between South Sudan and Kenya, which is called the Emi Triangle. And so there is infiltration, significant infiltration of small arms that are coming to Kenya. Now let me get to my point. My point is we cannot continue to be constant reactive. This is expected at one time or another. And you alluded earlier when I said Africans are going to fight over water resources. There is no question about it. You see it here and there. It's going to happen. So we need a clear policy by the KDF or the government that clearly indicate our clear boundary in terms of no infiltration to harm Kenya on that boundary, and the constant discussion and harmonizing the border with our neighbors, the Ethiopians. So they need a sense of permanency and a sense of constant collecting information so that we can be proactive instead of reactive. Just like securing Somalia border, we know exactly what's happening on the other side. And therefore, we cannot wait for 1 or 2 Kenyans to be killed, and then we are reacting. That's my point.
All right, thank you. And of course, as you've mentioned that, maybe we can segue also that particular point with what is on the front page of a Daily Nation, Naomi Damba. Science, mass failure crisis, Kenya's doom. What shall we eat? If maybe food is a critical security issue, and they say agriculture and science-based courses in university have not attracted students, dimming the country's development prospects. And this story is fully tucked away on page 6 of the Daily Nation. So there is a slow uptake on this particular critical courses that we are of sciences as well. And now we can see also the ministry is crying foul on this. What does it portend on matter security moving forward, which is food and is very critical?
I think on this one there is so much to say. We could even do a whole show just on this conversation. So I have some quick comments. First of all, just to acknowledge the bold leadership within the Ministry of Education. They are stepping into this, I guess, this swamp with boldness and clarity and data. And this is, I think, really important. The second point really relates to kind of how will we be seen as the generation by the next generation to come. And I think the next generation to come, maybe 2 generations on, because some of the next generation probably will be victims or culprits of these statistics, will be essentially, we will recognize this generation as the generation that went to school to get receipts, not results. That people paid for their, they paid for their results. And ultimately then it became just a commercial transaction like one would have in a restaurant. And how dangerous that is, I think, for a country that leans, like the rest of the world, into globalization 4.0, which is the world of drones, the world of robotics, the world of blockchain and fintech, and all these different digital and technological innovations that are really running our countries now, and how far we as Kenyans will be because of these kind of statistics. So there is a danger not just to food and agriculture, but I think there is a danger to all aspects of our lives. It's interesting, and the impact of this will probably be faced mostly by women and girls. Right? So inside of these statistics, I didn't see much of a breakdown of the gender disaggregation of these statistics, but just ponder on this for a moment. Less than 3.2% of our engineers, our registered engineers, are women. Right? 3.2%. Now, my concern is this, is if the world is moving to new jobs and new opportunities for people in this area, and we know that something like 600 million Africans will be on the planet in 2030, and yet we are not able to prepare our youth to be able to occupy that global economy. The obvious realization is that we're going to actually miss a golden opportunity, not only to secure our own security and our own economies, but even to impact globally.
But maybe also from that digital space, maybe they've taken it an anti-app where we have digital farming. Could we say now that the hydroponics,
robotic farming,
robotic farming, mechanized, I should say, but hydroponics and all, where we have farmless, soilless sort of farming, it could be maybe also the ministry navel gazing on this sciences that we still, we need to actually revise the curriculum to adapt to the changes that we have currently, isn't it? Right? If people are not really taking these sciences, is there a problem in the first place? Maybe we should actually question ourselves. We've been actually revising the whole curriculum.
The wrong kind of sciences.
Yes, yeah. Is it the wrong kind of sciences? Maybe we can pick the brains of Dr. Hassan Khanenje as well.
Debarl, even the most industrialized countries in the world, I think Professor Midamba can attest to this. When you go to Iowa or you go to Utah, where they have massive farms, they still rely on agriculture. In China, in Russia, millions of acreage when it comes to real agriculture. So the farmless farming is a great concept, actually, but it's still existing in the labs. Okay, it cannot really be rolled out on a massive scale, not today. We do not have the resources, nor even the preparedness and the capacity to be able to undertake that. So we're still going to rely on what God gave us, land, to be able to produce most of what you're going to eat. Now, one thing that is more scary than corruption in this country, actually, is corruption. That's economic corruption. It's corruption in the academic sector. You cannot have virtually almost no one trying to enroll in science of such a small number and then hope to industrialize. You know, forget about becoming an upper middle income economy in whatever year you want to put across. And if it's in fact true, and something I've been decrying on this show several times, that on less than 10% of PhDs are genuine, which I actually agree with in this country, then forget about any vision you're going to have, because these are the people who are supposed to be teaching our students. So what are they teaching? Now, no wonder our kids are performing so poorly, and no wonder a lot of them, they are unemployable, because you find a lot of graduates who literally cannot do anything. With regard to science, I do not know any country that industrialized in this world without investing in science. The trouble also with our habits and our culture, whether it's in the private sector, or in the public sector, or even in the media, we tend to glorify things that actually sometimes do not make sense at all, and causes that don't add a lot of value. And we de-emphasize science. Now, one philosophy that Obama used to talk about with regard to science, they say, you know, a country that out-teaches you today in science is going to out-compete you tomorrow. And part of his investment, especially in renewable energy and the economy of the future, was to allow the US to remain competitive, in part because it was falling behind other countries in math and science. And this is not something that should happen as an accident. It's something that we have to be deliberate about. Now, Magoha should move and take some action with regard to, we're just talking about quack nurses, quack doctors. We have quack PhDs. What are we going to do about that?
But how is it a quack PhD?
It's a quack PhD because you bought it.
The receipts he was talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got a receipt. It's just like a restaurant.
Yeah, we saw actually most of our students here, or even from abroad actually, they use some of our students to do their researches here, dissertations and the theses from our country as well.
Yeah.
And that is actually rampant in this country. I know fellows actually who've actually paid some of these guys to do their research for them, right? Dr. Noah Midamba, this is actually a domain.
Yes.
You're the people who are failing this country.
Well, I didn't know I was going to be attacked this morning. But
I'll be required to bring my certificate.
I think I better defend my territory, and I'm armed enough to defend my territory.
So we should call all these certificates for forensic audits. Yeah.
Yes. Debarl, we have a crisis. A crisis of unproportional. I think when the public read about it, they don't understand the depth of what Hassan Kanenja is talking about. It's very, very serious. And we cannot reactively deal with it. It's a systematic problem which begins from preschool to the university. Most Kenyans don't read. So the kids are coming through primary school without reading, without understanding and appreciating math. And therefore, we need to get to the bottom, the preschool reading and writing and appreciating books, and also being sensitive about things unimaginable. The point is right now, as we're sitting here at Debarl, China is developing artificial moon. And therefore, in the future, they will not need street light. You will have this artificial moon sign over the Nairobi, and so no street light in the future. But are we waiting to buy from China, Or should we be thinking about the future and creating that kind of thing? Let me just say about the university. We have spent the last two days with the World Bank that has done a major work in looking at Kenya higher education system and the way forward, how to restructure it. And Magoa is taking, Magoa understands higher education. He's been there, he grew through it. He's saying the right thing, and he may say things in a very hard way, but he required that in order to reform, shape people's mindset. When I came from America in 2012, I proposed a policy which is now been adopted nationwide, which is to close job the way university students were selected and actually put cement on top of it, and therefore create a new innovative system which allows students to choose what university they want to go to and what subject they want to study. And this now created huge competition in a way that there are departments at university that have no student at all, or a professor who has no student at all, because whatever they're teaching is relevant to the need of what we need today. STEM need to be created and appreciated at the pre and primary school, and then coming on to secondary school, and then moving on to university. And the government need to create incentive in order to do that. Otherwise, yes, we are going to end up with quack doctors, like the case we have just seen, and we end up with quack engineers who cannot develop and build a building that will last the way Chinese are building, or build our roads. We will depend everything on Chinese instead of ourselves, and accumulating incredible debt. We have to change our mindset. That is the bottom line.
We can also highlight the frustrations that some of these students also go through. We have engineers who graduated with sterling grades from universities, but they cannot even be absorbed by some of these bodies like the engineers board. And we had this long protracted case in the courts for a long time, and engineers were frustrated that yes, we cannot get these contracts.
Yeah, but
this is because largely we have this sort of people who have been in the industry for long, that they feel that they're really entitled and they hold a monopoly in some of these boards as well. Maybe we can hear from Erastus Mwencha. Until recently is when actually we absorbed some of his students. So why would I actually enroll for an engineering subject if I know I'll be frustrated at the end of the tunnel by the board, which is not really absorbing the students?
Yeah, Debarl, let me first of all agree with my fellow panelists and advance the point that Hassan said concerning the future, that the future belongs to those who will invest in what the prof has said, STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I come from a background of being the chair of African Capacity Building Foundation. One of the things that the foundation has done, and for the African Union for that matter, is to look at Agenda 2063 and say, what will it take for us to achieve that scenario that is painted for the future? That a continent that can be competitive, a continent that can be integrated, a continent that can deliver on the basic needs. And if you quantify in terms of even numbers, quality-wise, and by sector, we are not even scratching the surface. And that is because we have not invested properly. We have gone, as the CS was saying, for quantity and not quality, but also a wrong bias, because the continent has trained more of liberal arts than engineering. But that is because we don't have capacity. And the way we come from, and I think this is the conversation you should have with the World Bank, we stressed in the yesteryears about access to education, student enrollment, to make sure that kids go to school. But it was not about, and in fact, we were all ensuring that the kids can go to school. But where are these kids? You have seen kids sitting under a tree. How are you going to bring this kid up? I have a grandson who now knows more about the phone than I do, who was 7 years old. But then, are we training them? Somebody sitting out there, and you want them to be IT. The future we are looking at is ICT driven. You are going to be seeing artificial intelligence, robotics.
Yes.
But are we there? All these the things he's talking about, we're not there.
We're not there.
And if you look at the student ratio, student-teacher ratio, you look at the facilities that are in schools for us to train, they are not there. So we are dreaming as we sit here, planning for the future, but not investing for that future. And I think we have a crisis, as Irungu says. I don't see much conversation on this podium on these very pertinent issues, which is really on our survival for the future.
Right, lastly, let's hear from Njoki, Dr. Njoki.
I have so much to say about...
Please do in 2 minutes, because we need to take a short break.
About education. And I think I have 3 points. One, a good student is as good as their teacher. So I agree with the panelists about how much are we investing in training our teachers. And you find, if you talk to many Kenyans, they'll say, oh, I don't like math, I failed math in school, or I didn't like science. But the difference between like somebody who, of course there are so many other factors, but a good teacher. And so we don't invest a lot in training good teachers. We don't invest a lot also in inspiring young people to be scientists. So when young people watch TV, they just see, for instance, Debarl, people like you on TV, or politicians, you know, they never see scientists on TV, in the popular media, if you think about it. Or when you see somebody who does agriculture, it's a poor farmer, you know, looking haggard in gumboots near your village. So that young person already in their mind, that's not the future they want. They want to be, you know, they want to be like these techie people or these marketing people. So, and that's where we need to go back to inspiring young people to be scientists. I remember when I was at the University of Cambridge, every year there was an open day where primary school kids would come and meet scientists in the lab, and they would simulate also. They would be given little experiments to do so that they can get inspired to be scientists. And they were shown the link between the little things that they understand to science. So I think we really need, and I hope the Minister of Education, who is a scientist, is listening, and he's really the best person we have as a minister to implement that. The second thing is our neoliberal education, again going to that same point of what people see as what is to be successful, a career. We need to move back and also start paying people in agriculture, people in this kind of professions worth their money. And I'm speaking, this is very personal, because my first degree was actually food science at the University of Nairobi. And getting out of in the industry, and you work in an industry as a quality controller, and you earn almost a quarter of what the marketer and the fancy people earn, and the accountant. So we need to, I mean, if you are serious about agriculture, science, start paying those people, because it's very difficult also to study these degrees. And the last thing I want to say is also, we need to study our realities in science. And we find people doing lots of little inventions, but we don't, again, upscale that. We don't invest that. We're still taking science from the West, as opposed to realizing what our African realities, what our Kenyan realities, and how do we need to support those people so that we can find solutions to our own challenges.
Thank you.
And we don't invest a lot in that.
Right, thank you. Right, we want to take a short break. When we circle back, of course, we'll be crossing the borders as well to try and see what is happening in South Sudan and also elsewhere as far as security is concerned. Also, we'll highlight some of these editorial cartoons that we have today here. This is one of them in the Daily Nation today, the current revolution in Kenya. That's the map of Kenya there, which is being shared. Everyone is enjoying. You can see from the Archbishop, also the media is here. We amongst other leaders as well, and the posy of goons. And also we have inside the Standard as well. This is what Garo has drawn for us today. Back to the Future. And you can see that finger that is jutting out there. Supposedly, according to Garo, this is supposed to be the symbol of KANU. And they're saying, we have evidence you're planning a revolution, but that KANU salute has saved you, right? And This is how it looks, where we have that Boni Mwangi there, Mwakenya, Pambana, and the freedom of expression as it is currently. We take a short break right now. When we circle back, right, we hear from our panelists as well on these cartoons, and we cross over now to South Sudan to actually see this peace process that is meant to be realized, and the transitional government that is also meant to be in place this month. Will it happen, right? There are frustrations which are coming to the fore, which we will highlight them. And also we shall give you this details about South Sudan denying kidnapping and killing prominent critics in Sudan. That is Agri Idri Ezibon and Dong Samuel Luak. Up to now, their bodies have not been found as it is right now. Also, we'll get fresh details on this as well on the other side of a break. Don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of a break. later. Earlier on, we are looking at some of the headlines in our dailies today, and the science's mass failure crisis, or science mass failure crisis, Kenya's doom, is what is on the front page of a Daily Nation. We have Samuel Ruto saying we should make learning sciences in Kenya enjoyable and fun, not like it is today, a struggle. Science must be more practical, but not just mere theory, which lacks labs and materials, but in all fruits to harvest at the end to encourage students. We have Abdul Kadir Abubakar. Oh, he was asking, are all these newspapers owned by the nation, right? This is the Citizen and the Mwananchi, amongst others that we were highlighting. Yes, they are owned by the Daily Nation, except for the New Times. Also, we have Nyamogo Gogni on Twitter saying the government inspectorate team of medical quality assurance also must take responsibility if at all the so-called nurses at the hospitals were not qualified. There is need to conduct regular and announced audits of both public and private medical facilities to avoid such. And this is highlighting baby Ethan, that particular sad story that we Kenyans are mourning, this baby that was overdosed by, a dosage of morphine. She's a 7-month-old boy who passed on, and of course the family is grieving. Look, this is what now Stano has actually captured as well. As far as emergency is concerned, casualty departments, we have the government sleeping on the job, and people who are taking charge in these hospitals are actually quacks. Look at that. This is just depicting what the current situation is. We've not really highlighted this, Irugu Hilton, and maybe we can actually talk about it, because this is just telling, and this is just one episode of many that we know they've not been highlighted by the media on what is ongoing within, machinanis in the counties, or even here in the city as well.
I mean, I think in many ways medical negligence and I guess the extent to which our declaration of universal public health care is not translating into reality for millions of people is probably one of the greatest tragedies of our time. Having said that, there has been a lot of progress. I think the NHIF system, has begun to work for many people. It is saving many lives. The emphasis on maternal health care is very important. But ultimately, I think the efforts that have been put in place, either at the level of the cabinet in terms of the 4 pillars or in terms of the Ministry of Health, rest primarily on levels of integrity and the management of public finance at the county level. So all the scandals that we're seeing in the counties are really producing these kind of horrific cases. I think the medical doctors have been very clear that one of the things that they would like to see put in place is a commission that is able to provide greater oversight. And I saw them, the Kenya Medical and Practitioners and Dentists Union, meeting with the Health Committee, Parliamentary Health Committee last week, I think it was, to press this issue. And I think that would help to give avenues to people to be able to report safely and to be able to see justice done in cases like baby Ethan and others. And it is really a question of life and death. So it's not necessarily a question just for marginalized and poor communities, but really for everybody, particularly in the context of, raging incidences of cancer and various other things. I think our viewers could do no better, in the course of the day, if they're interested in this topic, to look at the economic survey that was released 2 weeks ago, which I would have to refresh myself in terms of some of the statistics. But I was very shocked by the numbers of, first of all, the good news is a lot more people are on NHIF. And the bad news is that there are too many incidences of negligence and unregulated medical practices. The last one maybe is the issue of the cost of medicines. Yes. So I think in one of the articles, I think it's The Nation maybe, I guess the financial crisis that is being faced by many county governments has led them to move from KEMSA as the source of medicine to private pharmacies, and the costs are of course much higher, and the openings for corruption are again doubled or if not tripled. And the 3 counties that have been identified as doing this regularly and at a very costly level are Narok, Murang'a and Nairobi. Right? And those are counties with large numbers of people.
Should there be a regulation? Because I think KEMSA, this is where the government should solely get their medicine from, aside from...
the problem is that they have been getting their medicine from KEMSA, but they have not been paying KEMSA. So KEMSA has refused to give them more medicine. and that's the crisis. And I'm sure underneath that there will be structural and issues around value for money. I mean, the more oversight I think we can give to our health institutions, the better.
All right.
But I think the idea that somehow this will not change, or rather this will change by us just waiting, is very dangerous.
All right. We can look actually also on this particular editorial cartoon, and we know what really happened as far as revolution is concerned. And he was being, that is Boni, he was being, of course, castigated on this, that he was planning a revolution as well. The freedom of expression in this country, I don't know, what did you decipher from all this incident, Dr. Hassan Khanenje?
Boni Mwangi, he is a little too bonny to actually be a national security threat for us, on a lighter note. We should not really be going back to the days of Kenya, those who are a little bit older, I think, remember that. Those were the dark days. And freedom of expression is something that is enshrined in our Constitution. And I think young and old, rich and poor should all be allowed to do that. We have more challenging problems in this country to actually deal with. I wish some of these people who commit economic crimes, they should be the ones actually sitting there and being put on the spot, as opposed to some young man who's probably just trying to make his voice heard. And his voice is not just a lone voice. He actually also represents a section of this country and ideals that a lot of also Kenyans believe in. And so I think his rights should protect in the Constitution. He should be allowed just like any other Kenyan. Because the trouble is when we let this go on, sometimes there's no turning back. You're going to just find yourself in a spiral of getting worse and worse and worse. And we're trying to move away from that. Now, unless someone has committed treason or someone is actually doing something as a national security threat, because we all have an obligation to protect this country, I don't think anyone should be victimized or be bludgeoned or be harassed because of saying what is on his or on her mind. And I think I don't have a complete understanding of why apparently was being accused of planning a revolution, but sometimes it's helpful that we stop being too emotional and too reactionary on things, and start thinking actually as a democracy. That and I think there's one president in the U.S. who said, that being a Democrat is believing that you can, as much as you disagree with your opponent, you are still willing to die for his or her opinion, which is contrary to yours. And has our freedom to express itself. So if we're actually trying to call ourselves a democracy, or at least we're developing towards that, I think we should build a more tolerant country, a more tolerant society. And so even those in government or those in the private sector, they should learn to adopt that approach.
Ambassador Hassan Khanenje, briefly on it.
Yeah, well, I think Hassan has captured quite a bit of it. Just to mention here that when a face like that one appears, it alienates the society more to the authorities than endearing them to the people. I mean, endearing the authorities to the government. Because use of force, and excessive force for that matter, because when you say revolution, was it a contest of ideas, or was he mobilizing using arms? We have not been told a lot, and I agree with Hassan that there is more to it than what we have seen through the media. But all said and done, I think if the intelligence had given information that that there is something simmering, then I think the best thing is how you address it. But as he said, in democracy, it is always said, I disagree with what you say, but I defend your right to continue to say it. And I think, to me, this is very bad optics for our society, and we should really avoid this kind of situation.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Njoki.
I think it's very sad. Seeing, and first I really like how Gado has captured, because that's exactly, that's the sadness. We do not want to go back to that time of Mwakenya. There are most of those Mwakenya survivors who live to tell the story, and who, because of what they went through during the Moi regime, It's because of that we have even the freedom of expression. And that must not be taken away. And it was really sad to watch what happened last week, not just to Boniface Mwangi, but also to Beatrice Waithera Maina, who was also protesting. And it was her right to complain. I mean, even the president has complained about corruption. Kenyans, I think, many Kenyans are fed up. And I think this is not unique.
Thank you.
And so we've seen, like in France, the yellow vests. People should be allowed to protest. Every day in America, there are protests against Trump. And there shall be because of, I mean, how unpopular or popular sometimes he is. So this, I think, freedom of expression, we have worked so hard since those times of Mwakenya to protect this, and we need to protect this.
Right. Lastly, we could actually also comment on this. This is still on revolution. Looking at the table there is the map of Kenya. This is Nyama Choma. And everyone is gagging to have a piece of this pie as well. The current revolution in Kenya, and even the archbishops, they are on the table as well, and the posy of goons. You want to highlight on this? Yeah. Vis-a-vis to the revolution that Boni is actually pushing for, so to speak, that revolution in quotes.
Yeah, I looked up what is the definition of a revolution, and allow me to just read this to you. A revolution is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in political power and political organization which occurs when a population revolts against the government. Right? So this is one definition of it. I think this cartoon and Victor's cartoon and Gado's cartoon are probably one of the two best cartoons to come out on the same day, if that makes sense. Because in a sense, what does it mean when a group of elected leaders or appointed leaders abrogate to themselves the entire budget as their personal wallet or purse? What does it mean when elected or appointed leaders decide that Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and perhaps even the entire Constitution, does not form the basis upon which they will govern? Is that not a revolution? Is not Victor's cartoon really a wake-up call that if we do not arrest the level of self-interest and greed that people bring to public office, that actually that beloved country of ours will be completely decimated and thrown into several pieces, right? Many more than climate change wants to turn us into. So there will be several interesting boundaries that are developed. So I think my comments, I think the two other comments really is, going back to Kado's cartoon, the decade of between 1982 and 1992 were probably the most horrific periods in our history, save the state of emergency in the 1950s. Hundreds of lawyers, doctors, students, teachers, civil servants were arrested, many on spurious grounds, and many essentially just on the grounds of superstition or fear that they would somehow topple the state. Many of them were tortured, waterboarded, locked up. Some of them were hung out of helicopters at one point. So that is a period that we do not want to return to. The third and last point really is Boniface Mwangi is doing what Boniface Mwangi does best. He is poking our national conscience. He is saying we have a problem. Wake up. And because not enough of us are waking up, the methods and the language gets stronger and stronger. And all he is trying to do essentially is to prod not only the country to see the danger that we lean into, but also to call on the state to defend Chapter 6. So these are Chapter 6 defenders primarily. So my appeal to the state is to recognize this without passion, without emotion, and with no sense of fear. That ultimately trying to snatch a torch away from somebody, and that's what Boniface Mwangi is for the moment. He is a torch, trying to snatch the torch away, rather than concentrating on what the torch is illuminating that we can all see, which is we have a political problem with regards to the public finances in this country and the way they're being managed. That's where we need to focus the country.
Thank you. Finally, let's hear from Professor Nomi Damba.
Debarl, if I have to plan carefully for this country, I will put parks around all the cities of Kenya and have a freedom corner with the microphone where anybody can go and speak their mind and be respected. in terms of supporting Irungu's assumption. We must raise the conscience of the people. We cannot put Kenya on the table and you have a fork and a knife and you cut your piece and I cut mine and leave millions of youth restless on the street with no future at all. Some of these people are scientists. They have graduated from universities. They can be gainfully employed and they can give significant reward to the country. We don't care. Now, why in the world is a member, what is their value, member parliament? And when you look at the cost per each, combine it all together, how are we letting this kind of thing happen on our own eye? If you take the state of Texas, you take per capita and look at the top industrialized country in their per capita, the state of Texas will be within number 10. The legislature in the state of Texas at part-time, they come for very specific reason, pass their legislation and get back to work. It is time we reduce members of parliament, and it is time we change their term, and it is time we cut down on the fat that we have in our legislative system in this country.
Right. Thank you. Right, we want to cross borders now and see what is happening in South Sudan. This is up next in our international news. Now, there were strong indications this past week that a full South Sudan transitional government may not be formed on May the 12th as the September 2018 revitalized, peace agreement, even as the rival parties converged in Addis Ababa for talks on Thursday to save the deal. Both President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar have been dithering on commitments to a final resolution leading to the formation of a transitional government. Dr. Machar has recently made it clear that he will stay out of the proposed government unless the security provisions, which include the reunification of the armed forces, are met. There were strong indications that, of course, a full transitional government may not be formed because also there are people who are trying to scuttle the whole process as far as think tanks are concerned. Now, we want just to drill deeper on this with our panelists this morning and just discuss what is happening as far as South Sudan is concerned. They're saying also that concerns are being addressed. It has emerged that President Kiir's government had hired an American think tank to help block the formation of hybrid court, a crucial pillar in ensuring justice and closure of the victims and survivors of a conflict. The government has signed $3.7 million contract with the U.S. consultancy Gainful Solutions, Inc. to help block the formation of hybrid court. Gainful Solutions is associated with former American ambassador to Kenya, Michael Ranneberger. And all this also, we have it inside the East African this week. If you may just grab a copy of the East African this week. Not again, Juba principles bent on blocking peace. That's their abiding question. And to the darkness, South Sudan's leaders dither on forming transitional government by May the 12th, with President Kiir paying former U.S. envoy Michael Ranneberger 3.7 million shillings to block the hybrid court. We'll also break it down for you to understand what this hybrid court is all about. But let's just begin with you, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, on this as well, because I think this is what the IGAD and African Union has been eagerly waiting for, to see the formation or the transitional government coming to fruition as well. But the infiltration now of these think tanks as well, who are trying to scupper the whole process, what does it mean?
Debarl, we have said on this platform before that if you look at the pattern and outcomes of what has been happening in South Sudan, coming to the table has not been a major problem, but it's implementation of what is agreed that has always been a problem. And I've said here before, one thing that I learned very seriously from Kofi Annan, which, he told us at one time when we were complaining about his long stay in Kenya, was the moment you have so many factions trying to broker peace, that is a recipe for disaster. And hence the answer to your question. And I think the reason for this proliferation of peace deal brokers is because they see no progress. Nothing is being implemented from what has happened. You have seen the churches trying, the Pope has even tried to call them. You have the Nordic, the US has its own angle, the African Union, IGAD. And so in the process, as they say, many cooks spoil the broth. I feel shattered because if you look at South Sudan, people are bleeding. There are many people in camps. There are many people who have been, whose human rights have been violated. There are, and so you see the government is only concerned about their own safety. They are hiring people to try and scuttle the process, which I think was done by President Obasanjo. He came up to say, rather than ask ICC to come in, let us create a hybrid court, which would mean having South Sudan judges plus other judges from outside who would then help address, because if you don't address those issues, particularly human rights issues, then you are not going to be able to move forward. So in a nutshell, we may be back to square one because 15th is approaching. You don't see really good progress. And the key issues like integrating the army, having a unitary government, addressing development issues remain a back burner in this case.
Erungu Houghton, Amnesty International, I think Amnesty International Sudan says the contract, this particular contract that we're talking about that was issued to, gains solutions, raises concerns that the Juba is not serious about the justice provisions of a peace agreement and ensuring justice for the people who have been executed, disappeared, and raped by the government and the opposition forces. Gainful Solutions is supposed to support American private sector investment in South Sudan in oil, natural resources, energy, gas, mining, and other areas, according to the contract. It is also meant to persuade the Trump administration to reverse current sanctions and block potential measures and open a military relationship with South Sudan. Your reactions on this particular development?
I mean, that to be honest, I stand by the position we put out a couple of days ago. The conditions for lifting the sanctions are not there yet. The conditions for an open and democratic society are not there yet. And if we need any more evidence of this, I think just the revelation from the UN panel last week that two South Sudanese opposition figures who were living as refugees in Kenya 2 years ago and were abducted and possibly their disappearance was enforced, leading to them essentially being tortured and we believe held in a security detention center back in South Sudan. And these are the two individuals, Dong Luak and Agre Idri.
We shall discuss that.
Okay, we'll come to that. But I think for me, these revelations continue to concern us. And I think what the leadership of South Sudan need to, and it's also a little bit ironic because I think it's less than a month ago we saw the political figures essentially standing while the Pope knelt and kissed their feet and begged them for a forgiveness, a charity of heart that would allow them to bring peace to their country. And this is what we're seeing a week later, really, or a few weeks later, with essentially the recruitment using public money, the recruitment of fixers to essentially just whitewash what's happening in South Sudan and also reverse the gains that we've seen over the last few years. And I think this is the concern that Amnesty and many other organizations and anybody who believes in the future of South Sudan, these are the concerns that we must continue to press. This is not the way forward.
Right, let's hear from Hassan Khanenja.
At the outset of this topic, you said that parties were acting as if they may not want to form a unity government. No, they will not be forming a unity government. by May 12th. That was the deadline. It's not going to happen. I think latest news is they've agreed to extend it by 6 months, a period within which they're supposed now to form the unity government. Now, one of the requirements in international, peacemaking, especially when you're trying to bring the two parties together, been fighting, bloody war, is you need an enforcement mechanism. So you need both carrots and you need sticks. Now, in the absence of sticks and credible sanctions, for instance, where if you fail to do this by this, then this is going to be the sanction. A lot of parties are going to be reluctant because most of the time, parties still want to have an advantage over the other, one way or another. And those people who are negotiating this and assisting the South Sudanese arrive to that, they should have moved beyond that and put together a coalition to ensure that actually that agreement is enforceable. In the absence of that, there are very, very few peace agreements in the world without enforcement mechanisms that have stuck. And I think we should have learned from that and moved, as whether it's the regional body working with the United Nations Security Council, to ensure that actually there's going to be punishment if you do not stick to A, B, C, and D. Because at this stage, parties still are doing what they want to do. Of course, it's not a good time to lift sanctions. It's good time to introduce potential new sanctions when parties do not stick to the peace deal.
Right. Let's hear from Dr. Njoki.
I think just for me, I'm just surprised that former Kenyan ambassador, former American ambassador to Kenya, Ranel Baga, could also, this lack of integrity, being involved with, this gainful ink, charging 3.7 million shillings of a country that is post-conflict, trying to get out, trying to do, so many challenges economically.
$3.7 million.
Dollars, oh my God. So to be a fixer, oh my, I don't even have comments. I'm just thinking this is even the integrity. Why would you do that to a country that is struggling to just get out of a long, drawn-out conflict? It's so wrong. Yes.
Right. Professor Naomi Damba.
Debarl, the starting point of all achievement is desire, sincere desire to see that achievement work out before you even start it. I have really serious doubt that that Riek Machar and Salva Kiir have serious commitment to come together. And so long as these two antagonistic folks are in the middle of this, I don't think we are going to see the end game anytime soon.
All right. Maybe I should also ask, this deal that also Omar is really shocked about shines the spotlight on Juba as companies associated with former American diplomats in Africa continue to support African regimes, run counter to Washington's push for democratization. And it further raises concerns about how South Sudan is falling into the basket of failed African countries whose natural resources are being plundered by foreign firms under the guise of bringing about stability. Could you comment on that, Ilungi Houghton?
I think there are. There should be there are ethical lines. I think. So I would like to hear Ambassador Erastus Mwencha's position on this one, because I think ambassadorial responsibilities are bestowed on individuals who represent states, and there is a certain code, I think, under the Geneva Convention that governs how you operate and discharge your duties. And I think in retirement, I guess one of the concerns there is that all the networks and the relationships that you have built up should not be used for that which would be questionable if you were still in the employment and still an active ambassador. And in this case, I guess what's happening is you're seeing some very questionable deals. You're seeing large amounts of consultancy money being wished around. But to be honest, they used to call it the Beltway. I think the American Washington, D.C. The Beltway was really a place where you had public relations officers and political spinsters, and we all know the program, The Scandal, where people fix cases. But I think for me the concern really is not so much that it's happening in the US context, but I think my concern is that this is just another blow or another obstacle towards the development of a democratic and a accountable state in South Sudan. That I think is the biggest cost that we are facing.
All right. I also want to maybe just dwell on this story that you had actually picked up on. This is still in the East African. If we may just pick the full screen on it. It says South Sudan denies kidnapping, killing prominent critics. South Sudan has rejected United Nations allegations that its security services kidnapped 2 prominent government critics exiled in Kenya in 2017, flew them to Juba, and days later executed the pair on a farm owned by President Salva Kiir. A report by the UN Security Council panel of experts published late on Tuesday said multiple credible sources suggested Agri Idri Ezibon, a member of an opposition group, and Dong Samuel Luak, a human rights lawyer, were likely killed by National Security Service, that is NSSS, officers on January the 30th, 2017. Idri and Dong were living in Nairobi when they disappeared in late January 2017. Kenyan Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Macharia, declined also to comment on this. The UN experts said in this report published by at www.undocs.org that the men were on their way to Juba on a commercial plane chartered by South Sudan's embassy on January 27th and held in cells in the NSSS headquarters known as the Blue House. 3 days later, the pair were allegedly executed at NSSS training facility located on a sprawling property owned by Kiir in Luri, 20 kilometers outside Juba, on the orders of the head of the service, that is a call called Cook. This is what the report is noting, and the bodies have not been found so far. And I know also Amnesty International has been actually putting tails on this particular story. Maybe you can also give us the latest on this.
I think it's a very sad moment for the families of both Dong and Agri, and I think also for those who have been following this case, it really is a very dark moment that it looks now that they were actually kidnapped, abducted, and then transferred against their will back into South Sudan, despite the fact that they were protected as refugees and under the protection of the Kenyan government. There was a long court case. I think it took 2 years to try and establish whether there was any culpability on the part of the Kenyan state or our intelligence services. The court came to a conclusion that there was no evidence of that, but I think the concern was really that they were actually kidnapped while on Kenyan soil, and it looks like they have been executed. And this is a very very sad moment in many ways, not just for these two, but really for all the political prisoners and detainees that are in South Sudan. I think the concern is that this does demonstrate a trend towards eliminating opposition rather than being able to accommodate a diversity of views or to tolerate different political positions within the country. There are 2 parts to this. I think, of course, our fellow panelists, and often we always think that we should have an extra chair here for Peter.
Peter Bierajak, yes.
Yeah, Bierajak, who, we are now moving into a very long period of incarceration for him and an insufficient level of legal protection. He's not really been able to develop a defense or to be able to respond to the charges that are being placed to him. Mm-hmm. But lastly, I think in related news, the Ethiopian government has just arrested and placed on trial the former intelligence chief in Ethiopia. And I think without wishing to threaten anybody on this panel, just to note that the arc of justice may be long, but it does come round. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that which we do in this period will be revisited at some point. So I think on the case of Dong and Agri, we can just simply say that this is very sad and heavy, and justice must be found, if not in this period, the next.
Mm-hmm. All right, maybe you want to comment on that as well, and the case of Peter Bierajak, who's, by the way, has been also a prominent member of our panel every Wednesday. He has been held in South Sudan since July 28th last year. So this is it last year actually? Mm-hmm. Yeah, more or less. It's almost 1 year. We're close to 1 year right now. and he was not really, presented to the courts. But now the information that we have is that he has been officially charged under Section 48 and 80, subsection 2 of the South Sudan Penal Code 2008. Some of his charges are here: that the offense of participation in gathering with intention to promoting public violence, a breach of the peace or bigotry. And here's his picture as well. If you're not familiar with that face, he's been here on our show. He says, peace or bigotry is committed whether the action is, let me just repeat that again. The offense of participating in a gathering with the intention to promoting public violence, a breach of peace or bigotry is committed whether the action constituting it is spontaneous or planned in advance, and whether the place or meeting where it is occurred is public or private. That is, what the penal code is reading as well. So we do pray, and I know also, Omai, this is very close to you because Peter was your fellow, student, or fellow what? Student, yes, at Cambridge.
Supervised together by the same supervisor. Yeah.
So you can comment on the letters as well. And
I mean, we just support also the family. It must be very distressing. It's so many months. And also going back to the point Irongo made, it's really, really sad what South Sudan has become. We were all so excited a couple of years ago when it actually became an independent country with so much hope and promise, and seeing what every day South Sudan is becoming, closing of the democratic space, wanton human rights violations, and of course massive conflict that is still yet to be resolved. And lights people who like Peter Biarajak and the other two who have been killed. It's sad that they've been doing such good work in making sure that holding the state to account, and yet then this is what they face. And so it's really sad. And also it's really sad to see these American companies making the US also speak from both sides of its mouth, because on one side they are supporting the government to do very dodgy things, and on the other side America wants to be seen as that doyen of democracy and good governance. So I think for me, I call upon again the many governments around the world, especially the US, the governments around Africa, the African Union, to make this, to hold the South Sudanese leadership now to account. I think it is time, something has got to give.
Right, so let's hear from the former chair, the deputy chair of African Union, Erastus Mwencha, on this particular development.
Debarl, my heart bleeds whenever I think of South Sudan for many reasons. I was there when that day the flag was hoisted in Juba, and you could see tears flowing out of the people who had been fighting in the bush since 1955, saying, at long last, we have a chance now to establish and chart our own course and destiny. I went to the bush with the former foreign minister of Ethiopia to request Machar to come to the table to negotiate. And at that time, I remember sitting in the bush with Riek Machar telling us that, look, let me tell you that there is not going to be any chance for us to attain any peace, but for your sake, I'll go back. Of course, he didn't. Since that time, he hasn't really gone back. Coming to the issues that confront us here now, when you see some of these superpowers playing the game they are playing, you can see that for them they are just looking at their own economic interest. I'm sure you have seen statement issues on the US on their collaboration with Saudi Arabia. For them, they say Saudi Arabia is a rich nation. We cannot afford not to cooperate with them. What they are looking at, of course, is the issue of oil that is in South Sudan, and to make sure that, for instance, China doesn't get it. So it's a struggle for geopolitics here to try and make sure that African resources are managed from our side. And we fall victim of this. The moment you see South Sudan hiring the likes of Randburger to go and lobby for them, it's because then, as Hassan said earlier on, to make sure there will be no carrots, because US has got powerful tools that they can block them under the UN or impose sanctions on them. So if Randburger can then lobby in Washington, because if you go to Washington, it is all lobbyists. In fact, Washington, every other building is a building of lobbyists. And so this is a game they're very good at, to make sure then that you can defeat justice and that you are in good books with the US, that the status quo continues. It is sad because this is happening in the backdrop of people dying, justice not coming, democracy not being pursued. And these are the people in the push. This is what they promised the people. But now it's a different story.
Finally, let's see from Nomi Damba.
Debarl, this week I spent time with the representative of the president of Congo, who is looking at opportunities to network with Kenya business people, Kenya strategists, and international investors. And I was pleased because I've been following the development very closely, that they are now reconciling, even with Kabila, to settle once for all on trajectory of development and to allow each other rooms to agree and disagree on a number of things. The parting words as we were talking is that the future and the development of the country called Congo is going to be the Congolese themselves. And forget this idea of other people like developing countries coming in to develop our country and all other people. It is the Congolese themselves. And so the issue of what we're looking at in Southern Sudan, Riek Machar and Salva Kiir excluded, is unless there is a real desire to harmonize this country and piece it together, like Raila and Uhuru did here in the country, and then, of course, followed by what Congolese are doing. Unless that desire is burning inside these people, we're looking at a long overhaul of looting and emptiness, rhetorics like what we have seen, which end up dangerously, that a lot of people are going to continue to lose their life.
All right. Dr. Hassan Kaninja.
Yeah, Debarl, I think denying culpability by South Sudan in the disappearance and murder of those citizens of South Sudan is akin to Kim Jong-un denying culpability in the disappearance and murder of his own brother, because no one's actually going to believe that. Now, as my colleague did mention, Debarl, as they say, the arc of history is long, but it always bends towards justice. There is a predictable end to all village tyrants, and we know how it ends, in misery. And today, they could be in power, and they could be lording over people. But tomorrow, they're going to be out of power. If they just look to their north, they should learn from it. I think it was yesterday the Minister for Information in South Sudan, because the youth inspired what has been going on, especially in the north and then in Algeria, say they're going to protest against some of these things that are going on in South Sudan. The Information Minister said, if they want to die, we will see. How can a government person say that? And I think as the region also and the leadership, we need to remind our friends within the region that, look, there is a proper way of doing things, and you're not going to be part of us. In fact, some of these countries, even within the East African Community and IGAD, we should perhaps take away some of the rights and privileges they should be entitled to because of behaving badly. Because if we just keep watching them do, as they say, in order for evil to thrive in the world, it only takes a good few men and women to sit back and do nothing. And we don't have that luxury of doing nothing in South Sudan. Kenya has lost more than any other neighboring country and has shouldered more than any other neighboring country as far as South Sudan is concerned. And I think that is something that should worry us all.
All right. Finally, if you have anything, we can actually move on and see what is happening also. Do you have anything on South Sudan to close with, Irungu Houghton? Not yet. Right. We want just to move on and see what is happening in Gaza, where Hanan Ashrawi, that is a member of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, Executive Committee has said Israel should be held accountable for the frequent conflicts in Gaza Strip and stop occupying Palestinian territories. In the meantime, the United Nations is urging Israel and Palestine to de-escalate the latest violence in and around the Gaza Strip. Stephanie Durojic, spokesperson of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, told the press that for the past year, the United Nations has been working hard to prevent the situation in Gaza from escalating and to provide humanitarian relief to the population.
Urged all parties to exercise maximum restraint, immediately de-escalate, and return to the understandings of the past few months. It is now up to the parties to implement these understandings. If the calm is sustained, the United Nations believes that we will be able to discuss longer-term arrangements to improve the situation and provide relief for the people of Gaza by easing the closures and supporting the reconciliation process.
This latest Gaza conflict is exceedingly stoking anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is rising sharply across Europe, according to experts. France reported a 74% increase in the number of offenses against Jews last year. And Germany said the number of violent anti-Semitic attacks has surged by more than 60%. The figures confirm the results of 3 recent Europe-wide surveys showing Jewish people feel at greater risk and are experiencing markedly more aggression amid a generalized increase in racist hate speech and violence in a significantly closer, more polarized political environment. The French President Emmanuel Macron denounced the trends as unacceptable, telling the ministers there that anti-Semitism in France was a repudiation of the Republic and its values. Also, Petra Pau, an MP for Germany's Die Linke party, said more and more people felt free to deny the Holocaust and engage in anti-Semitic agitation. Let's just hear what Antonio Guterres had to say.
Many are the victims of unprecedented, calculated cruelty and horror. This year's observance falls amid an alarming increase in anti-Semitism. From a deadly assault on a synagogue in the United States to the desecration of Jewish cemeteries in Europe, this centuries-old hatred is not only still strong, it is getting worse. We see the proliferation of neo-Nazi groups and attempts to rewrite history and distort the facts of the Holocaust. We see bigotry moving at lightning speed across the internet. As the Second World War recedes in time and the number of Holocaust survivors dwindles, it falls to us to be ever vigilant. And as the former Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sacks, so memorably said, "The hate that begins with Jews never ends with Jews." Indeed, we see intolerance entering mainstream politics, targeting minorities, Muslims, migrants and refugees, and exploiting the anger and anxiety of a changing world. Now, more than ever, let us unite in the fight for universal values and build a world of equality for all.
Indeed, the hate that begins with the Jews never ends with the Jews. A statement there from the General Secretary of United Nations, Antonio Guterres, that was given during, of course, the not really the celebration, but the commemoration of the Holocaust Day that was in January the 29th. Maybe briefly, as we're winding up, we can just comment briefly on this rising of anti-Semitism right now. What is really instigating this? I know this is a broader subject that will take a lot of chunk of time to discuss, and we cannot do justice on it. But briefly, even as you're headlining or giving your headline thoughts, you can actually comment on it. Let's begin with you, Irungu Hilton.
I mean, if I can, I'll just jump back to the earlier story, which was on Gaza and the occupation of Gaza. And I think it's interesting you've juxtaposed the two, because really they also fuel each other in some ways. But I think on the Gaza case, I have been really concerned about just the inability to break through, both in terms of the West Bank and the Gaza in terms of occupied Palestinian territories. As Amnesty, we invested quite a bit to try and block or rather to encourage online tourists who are using who are basically using Airbnb, the online accommodation company, from actually renting properties in the Palestinian areas, and because our view was that essentially what we are doing by doing that is actually legitimating a process that has been really driving Palestinians out of their homes and destroying their livelihoods. So that's one area. So I think Gaza is really the major focus, because just in terms of the scale and the magnitude.
Right. Dr. Hassan Kanenje.
Yeah. The rise of anti-Semitism, especially in Europe, actually has little relationship with Gaza itself. It's attributed to the rise of neo-Nazis and conservative parties within Europe and the United States, such as Donald Trump, who are actually encouraging it. That's why a lot of these people, when you see them and their views, they're neo-Nazi views. And the increasing xenophobia is actually attributed to that. Now, it is true that the attack on one group does not normally end with that group. Sometimes it tends to spread. And in Western Europe and the United States and other parts of the world, it's not just the Jews actually who are being attacked. It's people of color are being attacked. Muslims are being attacked. And I think when we talk about this, we have to put it within the larger context of tolerance.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Njoki, briefly.
I think just tolerance, and also going back to the two-state solution to probably get to the root causes of all this.
Right.
I think the UN Secretary General is spot on. And as a world, if we keep quiet, as we see the hate that started with the Jews, remember even the Holocaust, it started with the Jews. People didn't speak because they were not Jews. It went on until even those who were watching were victims of that process.
Right.
Debarl, the pact between Bibi Netanyahu and Trump is not helpful, either in the short term or medium term. And I'm much more concerned about the medium term, because you cannot keep Gaza as the largest prison in the world with millions of people castrated. Two-state solution is the answer.
Thank you. Right. Irungu Houghton, thank you very much, the Executive Director of Amnesty International. And also this marks as your last day because you're taking a sabbatical from the show.
I have earned a sabbatical, having been on the show between 6 and 8 every morning for the last, actually almost a year now. So I look forward to coming back.
Thank you. Thank you for coming through. We wish you the best. No, he's going to be around. Thank you. Also, Dr. Njoki Wamai, who is an assistant professor, international relations, USAU. Thank you for coming through this morning. We appreciate you. Also, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who is the chair of the African Capacity Building Foundation, chair of Trademark East Africa as well, and the former deputy chair of African Union. Thank you for coming through. We appreciate you. And also Professor Noah Midamba, who's the Vice Chancellor of KC University and an expert on foreign policy and defense. Thank you for coming through. And lastly, also Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director at the Horn Institute. Thank you for coming through. We appreciate you. And thank you also for your reactions on Twitter as well. My software, I think, was down as well, so I could not really populate a lot of your reactions as well. But thank you for driving the show with me. We appreciate you watching Standing on Guard here on AM Live. Living This is up next. Thank you.